Hey everybody, it's Brian Woodworth. Hey, I wanted to do a video for you because I wanted to share another conversation I had. And if you watch my video about where I was having a conversation with a lady that was carrying around a lot of shame, regret, and guilt, this video is an extension of that conversation because the conversation was so magical, and I just had to share it, and I asked her if it was okay, and she's totally fine with it. But as we're having this conversation, and it was really going on over a couple day period, I had mentioned to her about how I have loving conversations with my mind, because I know that the mind is not the answer. And I also know that the mind is responsible for a lot of the pain and suffering that you and I and everybody else has in their life, because the mind is continuously changing. Thoughts come and go, and that's one of my challenges and my issues with the personal development industry, is because so much time and energy is being placed in the mind, and that's not where the answer is. And so I was telling her that because the mind has been conditioned for so long, and the mind is so afraid of losing its significance, that we have to love it. And the way I do that is I have loving conversations with my mind. Now, before I say that, or before I explain more about that, is when I talk about having loving conversations with my mind, with the awareness that I have of what I really am and you are, I know that who is having that conversation with my mind is not me. It's not Brian Woodworth. And when you really understand this and get to a place of knowing, the conversations that you start having with your mind, the loving conversations, are pretty magical. And oftentimes I get emotional because I know who and what is really having that conversation with my mind. And so the reason I do have loving conversations with my mind is I know that that is where most of the problem is with pain and suffering. Because, like I said, the mind is so arrogant that it's also very what's the word I'm looking for? Inauthentic. It's extremely what's the word I'm looking for? It's just scared to death. It's so insecure. That's the word. And so what it does is, just like we, this mind body, when we are afraid to be authentic and the fear is present, we become pretty inauthentic. Well, the mind is really the one that is being inauthentic and insecure and arrogant. And so what happens, the mind goes into survival mode. Because, again, the mind is so afraid of losing its significance and losing its value and worth, as we become aware that it is fighting for its life. It's fighting for its very existence. And so what happens is it creates chaos. It creates pain. It creates suffering. Because it knows that at least that is something for you to acknowledge and pay attention to. But instead of getting rid of that way of being that your mind is, most people just want to push it aside and let it go and try to get rid of it. But I know that's not the answer either, because when we try to get rid of something and let something go, we will get more of what we don't want. It's just the laws of the universe, laws of attraction, whatever you want to call it. And so what happens is the mind goes into this funny way of being where it just fights for its life. And so what I do is I start having loving conversations. So I was having the conversation with this amazing woman as she's sharing her story, I'm working with her and giving her suggestions about how to work through and to love and embrace the guilt and the shame and the regret that she's been carrying for years. Like I said, she's an amazing woman. And so I told her, look, this is what I do. I have loving conversations with my mind. Well, she thought it was amazing. And she asked me, can you give me an example of how you have a conversation with your mind? And so sometimes I get a little surprised with what comes out of my mouth sometimes. And when I get in front of a camera, it usually doesn't come out near as profound and as amazing as it did when it first came into me. But this time, I was able to capture it. So I said to her, and I'm just going to read it word for word for you. I said, here's an example of what I say when I have a conversation with my mind. I said, mind, thank you for being so courageous and taking this whole new way of being on. I know it's very different for you and may be a little scary for you. Just know that I love you and that you will always be important and valuable. You've done so much for me over the years, and now it's time that you enjoy life and all the magical moments you've missed out on while protecting me. You are free from that responsibility because we are safe. You, mind, are safe. Just know that I love you and know that you will always be valuable and needed. But now it's time to love and enjoy life and allow our light to shine. Well, the fun part about that is when she asked me for an example, I was giving her an example, or was getting ready to give her an example, as what Brian Woodworth would say. And as I started giving her that message and that example, I started getting emotional. And it was in that moment I knew that my true self was showing up. And it was my true nature, my true self, who was the one that was really allowing those words to come out of me so that she would have the example that she needed. And when you get to a place of knowing what you really are, and you know who's really having that conversation with your mind, it gets pretty magical. And even she responded back that says, that made me cry. And I responded back to her and says, look, the tears were flowing as I was typing this text message to you, because I knew who and what was really having that conversation with my mind. And so if you find yourself, like most of us do, struggling with something and resisting something, it's all made up in your mind. And what we have to do is, instead of pushing it away and letting it go and trying to get rid of it, we need to start having loving conversations with our minds, because our mind is so scared to lose its significance, to lose its value. And it's going to do everything it can to survive and to prove its value and worth. And as you become more aware of who and what you really are, the mind has this idea that it's no longer going to be needed. It's no longer going to be as valuable or as important. And it's not the case. What we have to do is we have to just start training our mind and loving our mind and using it for more magical moments and magical experiences, because the mind is designed to survive and to keep us safe, and that's a heavy burden for anybody or anything to take on. So it's now time to love our mind so that our mind can be used for more loving, more magical moments and more just fun experiences. So if you are finding yourself in situations where you're resisting something, you're trying to let something go or trying to get rid of something, that's a great indicator for you, so that you can understand that your mind is needing love. It needs to know that it's valuable. It needs to know that it's worthy. It's significant. Because if not, you're going to continue to get more of that resistance that you're trying to get rid of and push away and let go. And the best way to allow it to naturally fall away is to love it to death, to kill it with kindness, and just love and embrace it. So take that, play with it. Understand that I will be doing some workshops and some retreats, and we'll get more into the deeper meaning and the deeper conversations with the loving conversations with our minds. But until then, stay well.